There's a question most people never ask. When you check your savings account and see 0.4% interest, and your mortgage charges you 6.8%, who's on the other side of that gap? Someone is. And they're not a bank. They're an investor holding a piece of paper you've probably never looked at. A bond. And that bond, not your paycheck, not your 401k, not even the stock market, is quietly setting the price of almost everything in your financial life. Your car loan, your rent, whether your company can afford to keep you employed, even how much your safe retirement fund quietly lost last year. If you don't understand bonds, you don't understand money. Not because bonds are complicated, but because they're the invisible backbone holding up every financial decision you make. And almost nobody has ever explained how they actually work. Let's start with someone ordinary. Emma is 32, lives in Portland. She earns $78,000 per year. After taxes, insurance, and her 401k contribution, she takes home about $4,700 per month. Her life looks like this. Rent, $2,100. Car payment and insurance, $680. Groceries and utilities, $750. Student loans, $420. Credit cards, $180. Subscriptions and lifestyle, $350. That's $4,480 before any discretionary spending. What's left? About $220 per month, if nothing unexpected happens. Emma recently refinanced her student loans at 5.8%. She has no idea why that number is 5.8% instead of 3% or 8%. The loan officer told her, "That's the current rate." But that's not an answer. That's a polite way of saying, "I don't set prices. The bond market does." And Emma, like most people, has never once looked at a bond. Let's start stupidly simple. A bond is a loan. But instead of a bank lending money to you, you're lending money to someone else. A government, a corporation, sometimes a city that needs to build infrastructure. You give them $1,000 today. They promise two things. They'll pay you interest every year, usually called the coupon. And they'll give you your $1,000 back on a specific future date called maturity. So when the U.S. government needs money, it sells Treasury bonds. When Apple wants cheap capital, it sells corporate bonds. When a shaky company borrows, those are called high-yield bonds, which Wall Street renamed from junk bonds because junk doesn't look great in marketing materials. That's all a bond is. A formal EU with a timeline and an interest rate. Now here's where it matters to Emma. When she refinanced her student loans at 5.8%, that rate wasn't invented by her lender. It was based on something called the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield. Right now, that yield is around 4.3%. The lender looked at that number and asked, "Why would I lend money to Emma for 10 years when I could lend it to the U.S. government, risk-free, at 4.3%? The answer, they wouldn't, unless Emma pays more. So they take that 4.3% Treasury rate and add roughly 1.5 percentage points for the risk that Emma might lose her job or miss a payment. That's how you get 5.8% Treasury yield, 4.3% risk premium, plus 1.5% student loan rate, 5.8%. It's not arbitrary. It's a formula, and the formula runs on bonds. The same math sets her car loan, Treasury plus 2 to 3%. Her credit card APR, Treasury plus 12 to 15%. Even her rent, because her landlord's mortgage is priced the same way. Every borrower in America is paying a rate that traces back to the bond market. Emma doesn't own bonds, but bonds own her interest rates. Here's the part almost no one explains clearly. Let's say you buy a $1,000 bond that pays 3% interest. That's $30 per year. You're happy. A year later, the government starts selling new $1,000 bonds that pay 6%, $60 per year. Now, someone walks up and says, "Hey, want to buy my bond? It pays $30 a year." And you think, why would I pay $1,000 for $30 when I can get $60 next door? You wouldn't. The only way to sell that old 3% bond is to drop the price. Drop it until that fixed $30 payment equals roughly 6% for the new buyer, which means selling your $1,000 bond for around $500. You just lost half your money. Not because the bond broke its promise, but because newer bonds are paying more. This is the rule that runs everything. When interest rates go up, existing bond prices go down. When rates go down, existing bond prices go up. They're on opposite ends of the same lever. For decades, financial advisors told people, stocks are risky, bonds are safe. So put 60% in stocks for growth and 40% in bonds as your cushion. Then 2022 happened. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates from near zero to over 4% in less than a year to fight inflation. And remember the rule. Rates up, forward arrow, existing bond prices down. The broadest U.S. bond index fell about 13% that year. Worst year in its entire recorded history. Long-term Treasury bonds, considered the safest asset on earth, fell nearly 30%. Retirees opened their statements and saw their safe bond funds down 15 to 20%. The part of the portfolio designed to protect them during stock crashes was the part bleeding. For the first time since the 1970s, stocks and bonds both fell at the same time. The classic 60/40 portfolio lost around 17%. Millions of people discovered that safe didn't mean what they thought it meant. There's a number that tells you exactly how exposed you are to interest rate changes. It's called duration, and almost no one checks it before they invest. Duration measures how much a bond's price will drop for every 1% rise in interest rates. If your bond fund has a duration of 7, it will lose about 7% for every 1-point rate increase. If the duration is 15, you lose 15% per point. In 2022, rates rose over 4 percentage points. So a bond fund with a duration of 15 lost roughly 60% of its value. People thought they owned something stable. They actually owned a leveraged bet on interest rates staying low forever. And when that bet broke, retirement plans cracked with it. Emma has a target date retirement fund. She's never looked at its duration. She has no idea if her safe allocation would survive another 2022. So why does any of this matter to someone who's never bought a bond? Because Emma's entire financial life is priced off the bond market. When Treasury yields rise, her student loan refinance rate goes up. Her car loan gets more expensive. Her landlord's mortgage costs more, which eventually shows up in her rent. Her company's borrowing costs increase, which can mean hiring freezes or layoffs. Even her stable retirement fund can lose money. She's not in the bond market, but the bond market is in her budget. And right now, U.S. government debt is around $36 trillion. This year, the government will spend over $1 trillion just on interest payments. Not infrastructure, not defense, just interest. That's more than the entire defense budget. When debt gets that large, even small rate changes create massive ripple effects. If Treasury yields rise another 2%, the interest bill could easily hit $1.5 trillion annually. To pay that, the government either raises taxes, cuts spending, or borrows more, which pushes rates higher again. Emma's tax bill, her employer's costs, her savings account yield, all of it traces back to this cycle. Financially intelligent people don't ignore bonds. They use them as the baseline for every decision. They ask, if I can get 4.5% risk-free from a Treasury bond, why would I take more risk for less return? They check duration before buying bond funds. They understand that safe and stable price are not the same thing. They know that when Treasury yields spike, everything else reprices. And they don't panic when bond prices fall because they understand the inverse relationship. They see the system operating, instead of just feeling confused by it. Emma's not behind because she doesn't understand bonds. She's behind because no one ever explained that understanding bonds is understanding how the entire financial system sets prices. Your mortgage isn't just your mortgage. It's the 10-year Treasury yield plus a margin. Your savings rate isn't random. It's competing with what bonds pay. Your retirement fund's safe allocation isn't bulletproof. It's a bet on interest rates, whether you knew it or not. You don't need to trade bonds. You don't need to become a bond expert. But if you don't understand the basic mechanics, how rates and prices move in opposite directions, and how that affects everything you borrow and save, you're navigating the financial system blind. And the system doesn't pause to explain itself. If this helped you see the invisible structure behind your financial life, consider subscribing. This is Hadi Invests. I'll see you in the next one.